So we're recording. Okay.
Today is January 29th, 2011. My name is Marty Dick. I'm interviewing Dee Spencer, who's been a resident of Sunshine Canyon for 33 years. This interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program, and it's being filmed by Don Dick. Dee, as you think about your Sunshine community life, what comes to mind?
Family, home, great friends, love, parties, growing a garden, taking walks, playing, working hard too, yeah.
And what events of importance took place there for you, starting in the year that you moved there?
My oldest son was born in a one-room cabin up there in 1979, Noah, and we had a home birth, and that little cabin is no longer there, you know, due to the fire as well. It didn't have any running water or electricity, so it was a fun experience and a good one. Yeah, so the first son that we had was born then, and in that particular cabin. And then later we had our second son in 1990. And we lived in the Spread Eagle Lodge in between there, and then built our modular house in 1985, the house that burned down that. Yeah.
And you're referring to the Fourmile Canyon fire that happened on Labor Day, September 6th,
Monday, yeah.
2010.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And our house was apparently one of the first houses to burn. It was gone by Monday night. I don't know what time Monday. So.
Given the geographic, the geography of Sunshine Canyon,
Mm-hmm.
and the town of Sunshine, how did the fire even approach your community?
Well, we were aware of it earlier that day, that it was in Fourmile, and we thought, well, it has a ways to go, you know, a couple of canyons to crawl over, even though the smoke was billowing big, but it almost felt like a fireball just blew through the air and past everybody else's house and lit the trees and the area on fire around the house, and then caught the house on fire. It didn't seem like it had any rational, not that fire is rational, but it didn't have any kind of rational way at all.
Did all the houses in your neighborhood burn?
Not all of them, so it was really very kind of selective. There's people's houses right next to us who are still there, and across the valley they're still there. And then it kind of came around over the next couple of days and caught some other ones up above us. But at first those were still standing, so yeah.
So a number of people didn't know whether their houses were standing or not.
Yeah, for several days, like first 2 or 3 days, it seemed. And that was really hard for them and all of us watching them, because it was one minute they were telling them your house burned, and you know, everyone's, and then, oh no, maybe it didn't burn, and it would go back and forth like that, like 3 or 4 times for some people. So we knew right away, which was, even though it was a shock, and you know, when you just don't believe it, it's hard, it's surreal, you know, that real, you can hear it, but you can't take it in totally. And kind of one of the things, the feelings I had was, even though we weren't allowed to go up, it's like part of you just wants to drive up there, you know, you want to, even though it's on fire and you know it's not a good thing to do. Part of you wants to see for yourself right away. So it's interesting.
And you weren't allowed to do that?
No, not until, I think it was Tuesday, so of the following week. Does that sound right? When they opened County Road 83, the dirt road. They opened Lower Sunshine before that, but it was that Tuesday where I drove up to the Bald Mountain area where everybody had stopped me, and they said they're going to let everybody go in about an hour, and I just waited there and went in with some friends and neighbors. So
everybody kind of had a chance to go in and see the good and the bad at the same time.
The good and the bad, yeah. Or I met Steve and Noah, my son, and his fiance, who they were getting married 2 days later, and they came up, and our younger son Dustin came up with his friends. Everyone brought their friends, so we all kind of met at our property, at our house, and I'd been there for a couple hours already, and everything was, you know, smoldering, but you know, there's part of you that doesn't want to leave. It's like you just want to, even though it doesn't feel good to stay, and you know, you want to stay there somehow, but you can't. But so it was good that everyone was in town. We kind of got to share that together, and then we went up the road and looked at some other people's property that burned too. So
when the fire first started, where were you?
I was at the Sunshine Schoolhouse. So it was Labor Day, and we were doing a work day. So it was the small board of, what do you call it, the board of directors for the cemetery and the schoolhouse. Some of us were there working together, Janice and Steve Hall and myself and Susie Covey, and there were some other people who came by, and everybody kept driving by and saying, you know, the fire is going and it's not looking too good. This was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I had the camera because we were cleaning the schoolhouse out, so we were taking all the schoolhouse chairs, desks, and we had them all lined up outside, and we were going to straighten things out, and it was a work day. But so I kept thinking about those chairs when I was down in Boulder when the fire was going on, and thinking, you know, I wonder how the schoolhouse is, and I wonder, because those chairs were wood and sitting right out there. So that was surprising to me that the fire skipped over the chairs in the schoolhouse, and it was fine.
And how old is that schoolhouse?
Oh my, is it 1900? That's
100
year
years old.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. And so it was a historic building along with the chairs.
That survived,
Yeah.
which was great.
And so as you saw your friends and neighbors driving by with packed cars full of treasures and animals, what went through your mind?
At that point, we were still kind of like Pollyanna. We were in disbelief. It was, you know, Janice's father, Harry, drove by and he said, you know, this doesn't look good, and, you know, we should really think about going home and starting to pack up. And then somebody else went by, a couple other neighbors, and they were saying, no, this isn't looking good, you know, I'm getting worried. And so we kept working. It was odd. We just kept staying with it. And then finally someone said, you know, you go home. I don't remember who it was. So we all drove to our homes. And Steve, my husband, was working at home on the deck with Dennis Covey and a couple of others, friends, to get the house ready for a rehearsal dinner party at our house for the wedding. And they were still working on that. So we all went up there, and we were saying, you know, you guys should go home and start gathering your stuff too. And everyone's like, well, what are you going to get? What do you get? And this was a theme because the phones had died, I think, right? The electricity and the power went out. so there would be no water as well when the power goes out. And then all of a sudden, we were still outside talking about all this. The phone rang, so we had one of those old-fashioned plug-in phones, you know, not...
A rotary phone.
Yeah, a rotary. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I ran all the way upstairs because I thought, well, whoever it is, you know, need to get it. So I picked it up, and it was the reversed 911, you know, phone call, but it was a recording, and it was only part of it. And it said, your area is being evacuated. And we had heard that anyway. And either go to Netherlands, which sounded odd, or somewhere else. I think it was one of the rec centers in Boulder. And so I came down and I told everybody outside about that. And everyone went home, and I said, you know, the first thing I'm thinking of getting is my flute, which I've had since I was 15. And our musical instruments. So Steve started gathering guitars, and I went around the house and got artwork off the walls of my dad's and some of our families and Steve's and mine, but most of Steve's we didn't get because it was in the studio. And but just sort of random things, mandolin, some instruments, some photo album books. That was pretty key. And my wedding dress that I had picked out. Not very many clothes. And you know, part of you is thinking, well, we'll be back in about 2 nights. You know, maybe we'll just need toothbrush and a change of clothes, whatever. But then part of you too is going, well, there's another part that clicks in. You know, Steve got the computer, and he got some of our files and paperwork and stuff, which was good. So, and the phone kept ringing, this one phone. My neighbor Elena across the way said she didn't get the 911 call, and what should she take? And I said, well, you know, I'm looking for photo books and instruments. And she said, oh yeah, yeah. And then Janice said the same thing. She was like, what are you thinking of taking? You know, it's just such an odd thing. I mean, you have some time. I think there was a good hour maybe of where, you know, we were actively taking things out to the car, but we weren't moving that fast, and still kind of considering staying there. You know, the air was getting pretty smoky. There were pieces of white ash paper going in the air. So we sat down and ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich outside. And I said, you know, this is not looking too good. You know, it just was feeling real close. So we left there about 2:30. And other people were starting to drive by past our house with their dogs and their belongings, and yeah.
Could you see the fire?
Mostly the smoke. So I have pictures of it on a digital camera from the schoolhouse, and it's mostly the sun with obscured by all the smoke. I didn't actually see flames. So maybe we would have moved a little faster if we saw flame, but you know, you saw and felt the wall of smoke, you know, I mean, you could tell it was not too far away, but it was closer than I thought, I mean, in the end.
Not only did you take things that you thought were important, your musical instruments and paintings and scrapbooks. Later on, you learned that some people had taken some other things for you. How did that work out?
Mm-hmm. Well, a good friend stayed behind and fought the fire.
A fireman?
No. A few of the local people stayed behind, friends, and he had planned to leave, this one guy, and had his truck, and I think he actually went to Boulder and came back up, or he was about to leave, and the fire was somehow going right up toward the house. And so apparently, I haven't heard the specifics of this story, but maybe 2 or 3 times they actually put the fire out around the house.
How did they do that?
I don't even know.
Because your well
Shovels?
wasn't working.
No.
So you
So
have
I don't know if they
wall.
kept digging a line below the house with shovels. I mean, that's been one of the things that I've heard. I don't think there was any water. So they kept protecting the house. I guess that's the best way to say it. But then the fellows that live at the end of the road, I think there were 4 of them, they stayed somehow, as well as our friend Mike, who saw that the fire was getting close to our house. And that was when he decided he was going to stay. And he actually saw the house burn. And the guys at the end of the road had tried to save the house a couple of times in whatever way we're talking about. Those details are to come. But they went in, I think, to the upstairs of our house because the studio had caught fire outside, the art studio. And so they took some photos and some artwork that was on the wall, and my grandmother's rocking chair that was in my family for a long time, and some things that were really deeply meaningful to me, especially my dad did a painting of me playing the flute, and they brought that down, and a couple other paintings, the rocking chair, photos, just, you know, different things that they thought seemed important. And I just thought how wonderful that was. And apparently there was some glass breaking and stuff like that in the house, and then they had to just get out.
So actually they were doing this when the fire was pretty much enveloping your house.
It was there. So
that was pretty wonderful.
That's, you know, I still am looking forward to talking to them and hearing their story about, you know, the reality of being in a house that's got is catching on fire, you know. And but apparently they never felt like they shouldn't be there. I mean, they pushed it up to the point where they couldn't any longer and got out. But yeah, so
were they permitted to be there in any way? Since you weren't permitted, how did these folks happen to be there?
Well, I'm really glad that they did because of the things that were saved that are so meaningful for me. And no one died and no one was hurt, and so that's all the details I know.
Did they know you well enough to know what things would be special for you, or they kind of looked around and thought, that looks like we ought to take that?
They don't especially know us that well, but they had a good eye and seemed to know what would be important. So that was really special and meaningful and a loving thing to do, you know, really awesome. So yeah, I don't know them that well, and I'm looking forward to talking to them and hearing their story too.
So the houses that were directly around you, were they burning at the same time? Do you know? Or were they burning the next day or the...
Later, I think. I think it was our house, and then they were busily trying to keep the fire away from the houses up above, which they did save. And in the middle of Sunshine there on that county road. And so I think it was really when the fire came back around through Misty Vale and came up through there and that whole valley back around by the Mahoffmans, and then came up to Pavel and Beth's, you know, kind of circled around. But it didn't get the Hall's house, and it didn't get the Carpenter's house or the Bender's. Elena's house is there. I mean, the whole Buttsville Hill was on fire, apparently, but Elena's house is okay. And then we kept, she was one where 1 minute it was on fire and 1 minute it was not. And turns out it's fine, but you know, I think some of the people's septic fields got ruined or changed.
Well, there are a lot of things to be thankful for, even just that nobody was hurt. And, were the firemen in there at that time trying to save some of these houses? Do you know?
I think they were. Well, some of them were in Gold Hill and in Fourmile and not in Sunshine. And then some of them made reference to, they thought about our record collection and all that vinyl burning, and it made them really sad. So I don't know if some of them were nearby or just had heard about it, but because that was Monday night.
Which
So
was the night that what
The
time
day.
did the fire start? Do you know?
apparently, I mean, we left home at 2:30, and some of those houses I think were gone by 4:30 that were, yeah, in the, you know, like Artie and Jean's and the Ball and Mountain.
on counter
Fourmile,
52.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I am imagining that it was probably maybe 4:30 or so after that, maybe, I don't know, or if it was night when that came across to our house. So.
And some folks, and so Mr. Vale burned later. The next day?
As far as I know. I think it was Tuesday.
Or it was Tuesday? Or I guess that, from what I've heard, that even on Wednesday, there's still fire around that had the potential of getting a house inflamed.
Tuesday or Wednesday. I think everything was done by Thursday, but I'm not totally sure.
So, when you went down, could you see fire along the road, along 52, or actually along 83 when you left?
I never did see actual flames, just a lot of smoke. So when we were leaving, it was really quiet, and it was almost like, you know, we were the only ones driving out. I didn't really see a lot of, well, I had seen some of them leave already, and there was a real quietness driving out and down the canyon. And we went real slow and took our time. And there was a man walking his 2 horses down the canyon. He wasn't riding the horses, but he had one on either side and was walking them down Sunshine Canyon. And it was kind of a funny moment because it was like, stop and ask him if he wants a ride. Well, he's got 2 horses. He could, but you know, instead of riding one, and you know, it was a real memorable picture in my mind. You know, him walking the horses down. So we didn't really see anyone.
So how did you decide where you were going to go?
We went to the Moe's Bagels area and sat and saw some neighbors, Abby and Bill, and we were all sitting there and watching the smoke just get bigger and bigger from Boulder. I mean, we could see it really well. And then our youngest son, Dustin, said, well, you can come to my house to spend the night. He's got a couple of roommates and lives in Boulder and is a student at CU. And then Noah and Naomi were to be married a few days later, so Naomi's mom is a good friend of ours, and she invited us there. So at one point we started to drive over that way. We each had our cars, so I was driving Monday afternoon after we'd been at Moe's Bagels. I drove over to Diana's house, which is in Table Mesa, and I was kind of driving that way maybe around 4:30, and I was looking back in my rear view mirror kind of at the mountains and at the smoke, and I think I just started crying. It was like I sort of had this feeling that something was gone, even though it was there was no way to know that, you know, it was just kind of a feeling of, it was emotional, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It was like driving along, I was thinking, So we spent a couple of nights, 2 or 3 nights at her house in Table Mesa, and then people started saying, well, you can stay at, I think it was the Outlook Hotel or various motels that were offering their services or whatever. So we stayed quite a few different places. We moved around a lot. Yeah. So we didn't know. We thought we might be going back though, you know, in a couple nights.
But you did know that you had guests coming from out of town because of the wedding.
So my mom and dad and Steve's mom and sister and my brothers and their wives and my nieces, and they were all coming, and they were going to stay in Sunshine, some of them, either in our house or friends' houses. And at that point we didn't know if any of those houses were still there, even after we knew about ours. So word got out, you know, that this was going on through Celestial Seasonings, where Steve's worked for many years, and so people were calling in and saying, what can we do and how can we help? We know they were going to host the rehearsal dinner party at their house and have their family stay there, and that their house is gone. So people started making offers, and generous people from the past that used to live in Sunshine. That's where the rehearsal dinner party was, on Cherryvale. Dan Page and his wife Kim and their son. So we had a place to do it that was really kind of fun, and a big organic garden with sunflowers and things like that. The Celestial Seasonings people, some people offered a house, which was Mo Siegel's house in Boulder, that housed like my mom and dad and Steve's mom and sister, so they could have a place to stay. So everything worked out, you know, kind of magically, and it was like we were kind of carried along by all these wonderful things that came together, you know. So we didn't really have to think about it much. And then we just kept moving around a lot. We were staying in a house that a friend of ours offered in Niwot. She isn't there in it, but she said we could stay there, so we did for quite a few days. And then we moved to the Chautauqua cabins and stayed in 3 different Chautauqua cabins, which was nice. So, and then we landed here.
What day was the wedding?
September 18th. So the fire was the 6th, right? And so not too many days, like a week or a little more than a week later. And family started coming into town pretty soon after, or before the wedding, of course, just a few days. So that was about a week or so after the fire. So a lot's going on.
Was it distracting and good, or was it very frustrating to have to try to deal with all these things?
It was good because, you know, it was really good to have our family, and everybody, you know, we called everyone and said, don't, you know, cancel your flights, or even though we don't know where you're going to be staying, you know, come, you know. So it was really good. I think people made more of an effort than ever before to be here, which was really a lot of love and good. It was good to have that support. And there were times when it was a lot, you know, because we're trying to orchestrate things to get ready for the wedding and be with family and make sure everybody was okay and go to dinner and, you know, lots of fun things. And then also we were meeting with insurance adjusters who we needed to let the insurance company know right away. So that was all happening at the same time. Trying to remember every piece of Tupperware and silverware, and, you know, like going over everything with a magnifying glass in your house, you know, for about 6 hours just verbally with this adjuster. We, you know, wrote everything down, and but yeah, it all seemed to be the right thing.
And then Steve took some pictures.
Mm-hmm. So we have on our computer, we have pictures of the house before it burned, and we have pictures right after the fire, the day of the fire, when I was working at the schoolhouse, and what else?
Well,
Lots of pictures.
probably as he walked around the house,
Mm-hmm.
taking pictures, it helped you be able to recall those things for the insurance adjuster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just because they go from room to room, you know, verbally, so you kind of remember everything, you know, and what was in that room. And it's interesting. I mean, after all those years, you've got a pretty good idea, but then you also forget a lot. And I think to this day, we are still going to be remembering things that we haven't remembered yet, but certain things jog your memory. And the insurance people say, you know, you're not going to remember everything, and it's just kind of an outline, I think, to get things going. But yeah, we have photos, and so.
So it sounded like the insurance adjusters were fairly understanding of the situation you were in.
Yeah, they seem like good people. I mean, they say not to get too close or too friendly with your insurance adjusters and agents, but it's also, it seems like ours seem pretty straightforward. They have done what they said they were going to do and kind of have been pretty realistic about it. So.
What other things come to mind as you're thinking through this?
Well, we've talked a lot about what home is, and I've done some writing about home, just kind of journaling after moving around so many different places and being uprooted. And of course you don't have that much, but you know what you do have, the photo books, the instruments, we kept moving it around, or we stored some of it at Diana's house. And then we lived in 3 different cabins in Chautauqua, which was good, but we, you know, they're highly wanted, or whatever, those cabins in September, October, November. So we just had to move around because of that. Good place to land, really nice place to be. But we had a time where we had some time in between cabins, so we took a trip to Taos, New Mexico, and Mancos, Durango, southern Colorado. And it was a beautiful trip, really nice October, you know, kind of fall leaves, and gorgeous, and saw some friends and looked at houses and things like that as far as rebuilding our house, which we are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we were driving back home, and it's quite a long drive, you know, but we took a scenic way back through various places in Colorado and took walks and stuff, and it was getting late at night, and we weren't coming home to any of the cabins. We were going to a hotel, which was in between the cabins before we go back to a cabin to land. And it was late, and I was just thinking, you know, I really want to go home. You know, that feeling you're tired, you know, and you're looking so forward to going home after a trip. And it really hit me just on a body level, cellular level, you know, that it's like that sense of when you want to go home and you don't have your home. There's lots of places that can act as home, and they're comfortable and cozy, but I felt that home is the place where you get deeply rested. So you really have a deep sense of rest in your body. It's a comfortable place. It's not just, you know, your things are there and everything, but it's kind of, you have this base to sort of, you know, fall apart in or get re-energized in, and, you know, it's very different than when you don't have it, and, you know, making all these other places your home. So it made me think a lot about homeless people, and that they must feel that too. You know, you really want to go home and you can't. Sort of a feeling, what that really feels like. But home is a place where we can really get, you know, nurtured, deeply rested, inspired. But so yeah, I learned that just by kind of moving around and being scurried along, you know, uprooted. Yeah.
And you learned that you had an awful lot of supporters, an awful lot of friends.
Lots, lots.
And even folks you didn't know you knew through some TV coverage that occurred.
Yeah, there were, the first day after the fire, you know, we would meet by the Justice Center, and walking up, I thought we were going to get some water, and they would tell us what's going on. And instead, there were all these news people with microphones and things, and I just kind of walked right into it. And there were probably, I don't know, 3 different news channels I talked to, and they say, well, you know, how do you feel about losing your home? And it's like, I'm not quite sure. You know, it's pretty surreal. It feels like, you know, it should still be there. Like I should still be able to go home. It's a surreal feeling, but, and that led to, then there was some CNN people and a little interview that we did there. So by way of being in the news, or on the news, people learned about our situation, so a lot of great help came from that. Like you say, from people we didn't know, or people we did know, and so people were informed. But we haven't had a TV since our house burned down, so anywhere we were, it was interesting, there weren't televisions, so we didn't watch ourselves on TV, thankfully. I don't think I want to see that just as well, right? But, you know, you hear about it. News gets out, right?
News gets out, and so lots of people
respond. Everybody
Yeah.
wants to help, you know. That's one thing about people. I think they really want to help, and there's something about learning how to receive, you know, because I think a lot of us are givers and give a lot and enjoy that, and it's different when you're on the other end and people, they want to give you something. So learning about, you know, accepting that, or telling people how they can help specifically is really helpful, you know.
certainly had some specific needs at the time of the wedding.
So all those things came together, the yard for the rehearsal dinner party, like a garden party, and houses for everybody to stay in, and yeah, it's good.
How did you feel after the wedding?
Well, everything was really kind of on a high, you know, for energetically, all the people in town, the love, and just the goodness of that. Everything went beautifully, the wedding and the parties, and everything was great. So after everyone went home, there was a little bit of the letdown of, you know, now we really got to, even though we were focusing all the way through this with the people, the insurance people, because we had to, you know. I had to get a cell phone, which I've never had a cell phone in my life, but since the landline burned, and I knew people would need to get a hold of me, so that was a new thing. But there, afterwards, you know, it kind of sunk in a little more, and it was like, you know, the details of going to all the different meetings around town, and you know, kind of, it seems like it comes in waves as far as feeling it on that visceral level or whatever, emotional level of, you know, missing that life that we had before. And I'm looking forward to going back. It's really different, and I know that. But you know, there's kind of a feeling of loyalness, is that the word? To wanting to, you know, take care of the land that we do have, and rebuild and do what we can. So that's exciting too. But yeah, it's a big mix of feelings.
And speaking of what you do have, some of Steve's pictures showed that how very peculiar the fire
behaved. Didn't behave, no. Yeah, almost. Someone who was there said it was almost like little tornado type. The fire almost, you know, spun off because of the embers, you know, shooting up. And I don't know if that's the wind that did that or what, but I've heard people say it's almost like fingers of where it burned and where it didn't. And there's places, I went to the graveyard in Sunshine and was walking through there a couple of times, and that was a good view back over Sunshine, looking back over Sunshine, and I could kind of see this particular day, it was kind of gray out, where, you know, it didn't burn and where it did burn, and you could see sort of those lines of more like a hand, or, but yeah, no, fire's not rational anyway, but it's just, it seemed like I don't know, between the wind or that sort of activity of things blowing up and off through the air created a different kind of fire, I think.
He showed a picture of a bench that you had for sitting in comfortably in your backyard, which was surrounded by green and which was fully intact.
There were two metal white chairs, you know, those old metal 1940s chairs. Those were fine, and the wicker thing was really made out of some kind of plastic, but it had some meltedness, but it was okay. And what else? We had a little sandbox with, the sand was still there, and some of the rock wall that Dustin built to get ready for our landscaping is still there too, and intact. And Steve had made this like brick patio, and that was still there. So the things that didn't burn, you know, was interesting. And then after the debris removal, there's funny little knickknacks and stuff like that, like salt and pepper shakers and porcelain odd things, you know, really knickknacks more than anything, or old metal trucks that survived.
Real trucks or toy trucks?
Toy trucks,
yeah.
Which is kind of neat. But it's interesting, yeah, knickknacks, kind of anything made out of terracotta or brick or glass. I mean, unless it broke, you know. That was another memorable thing, is what the fire did to glass, you know. It's like sort of twisted it into these odd shapes.
Which, as an artist, you could appreciate on some level. And you had some collections of things, too, there.
Yeah, lots of collections. We're all musicians and artists, so old collections of books, children's books, and music books, and art books. A lunchbox collection from the 40s and 50s, which was a great collection, like Western and Popeye and Bonanza and all these. Really good collection. Those are all gone. And comic books, I'm trying to think, lots of collections that are interesting more than anything, and worth it to people who like antiques or art and music type things. Record collection, a really huge record collection, which I miss.
As you say, a vinyl record collection.
Yeah, vinyl, so old records, classical or rock and roll or jazz or swing. There was all kinds of different music. People used to not like to carry their records around anymore, and they would give us their collections. And then they'd move back east or something, and then, you know, things went to CD players and on like that, and there's still something really fun about putting a record on. I still want to get a record player, some records. I like them. No, it's just, it's different, you know, if they're in good shape. And I think it's the art, too, of the albums. You know, you've got this thing you can look at and you can read about, you know, on an album cover, and so they're kind of unique. Yeah.
Did you go back and go kind of sift the remains kind of thing?
A tiny bit. Our friends were there, and people did the debris removal, and they kept saying, you know, do you want to look through this? And we looked through it a little bit, but I didn't really want to do that, like raking through stuff. I don't know, it was kind of, I told the people who did the debris, if they found anything, just to kind of put it off to the side, which they did, and it's still sitting there, you know. Like I say, the little odd collections of trucks and salt and pepper shakers and things that didn't break. So, but no, I didn't really like, I mean, I walked through where all the rubble was, but it's kind of hard to walk through that stuff.
I bet it was, and of course it was still smoky. And ash in your lungs, and
yeah, that was,
everywhere.
yeah, I didn't feel too good a couple of times after that, you know, being up there and breathing it those first few days, so.
And the wind continued to kick up the ashes. I was standing at the firehouse on 83 a day, at least a week after the fire, and I saw a wall of what I thought was smoke come down the valley from west to east. And I finally realized that it was smoke. Not only smoke, but it was ash. And there was this wall of ash that it was, you could barely see through. It just went right straight across the 83, probably not far from your house. And showed that the wind was still wreaking havoc in the area. And I assumed that that ash was dead. But it makes me wonder whether there were embers still floating across. Did you have worries about things like that?
You mean days later or weeks later? Or?
Whenever.
No. Well, you know, I knew that the house was gone, so, except for our neighbors, and that we were with them every day, you know, sitting there waiting for the news. And like I said, that was kind of a yo-yo kind of thing, back and forth. And even afterwards, I was trying to look at newspapers, and in the newspaper it would have the numbers of the houses, which was, it was really hard to figure out whose house was what, which, you know, makes sense. I mean, how could they take the time to say whose house everything was at that time in the middle of the fire? But, you know, I was trying to follow it. And there were, I think there's still some that it's like, I'm not sure of certain people that I didn't know as well, you know, because so many houses were affected. But, yeah, I guess once it was done, I didn't think about the ashes still being there, or floating around, or moving around. A little bit, with the, you know, the first day when we went, and there were so many of those smoldering pots of fire everywhere, or smoke. And we kept telling, you know, the fire people that were around, those guys that came in from, I forget what they're called, not the hot shots, the
Miracles?
yeah, the guy that had the big metal hat on, and he was in our driveway. I can't think of what his name was right now, but I think he was either from up north or something like that. But we told them about all those burning pots of fire, and we're like, you know, and some of them they wanted to just let smolder or let burn out for a while. And then I think they might have gone back and put water on them. But other than that, you know, just the immediate wondering how those places were in Sunshine, if they should be still burning or not. But they were aware of them, seemed like.
So as you look forward, as you said, you're building,
Mm-hmm.
and what goes into your thoughts as you are creating a home in the same space again?
Well, it's exciting. It's a chance to, you know, even though we weren't planning on this or counting on it or anything, to create, you know, a new home that's beautiful and artistic and a good place to be as a family again. And there's a little bit about that that's, you know, you're moving forward and making the best choices you can, and a little bit of, you know, wonder about how is it going to be, and it's a different place now. But a lot of love and good community and friends up there, and still looking forward to going back and being there. It's a big process though, you know, building a house and thinking about all these things that we haven't done it quite from scratch like this as we have before, you know. So everything has to be figured out and choices made and decisions. And on one hand, you know, you don't really care. It's like, we'll just do it. But then there's details that you kind of really need to figure out, and what do you really want, and with the floor and the roof, and then there's the rules of what you can and can't do now, the building codes. So yeah,
you have a lot to look forward to, but also a lot of work.
Yeah, a little bit both. But I think once it's going and we're actually, you know, building the house, it'll be really fun, and it's going to be a different kind of work, which I think I'll enjoy that kind of work more than the mental, you know, in your head kind of trying to figure things out, and without actually having the tangible thing in front of you to go, oh, well, now you can see this, and what do we want to do here or there? You know, it'll be more obvious, and I think more fun to actually be part of that, be up there, working on it.
Yeah, I could
hands-on, you know.
Hands-on. It sounds like,
I mean, even though I'm not going to be actually building it,
right.
But you know, we are. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
So
yeah, it's an opportunity, and it's a gift, or it's the silver lining, you know, of the
and it's the return
fire cloud
to the home where
Mm-hmm.
you can be renewed
Mm-hmm. And deeply rested.
and deeply rested as this process takes this next steps forward.
Mhm.
I'd like to conclude this interview with showing some of the things that you have mentioned
Mhm.
and which you or your neighbors were able to get out of your house.
Yeah. So this is the flute.
Recording.
This is the flute that I have had since I was 15 years old, that my parents bought for me in Ohio. And music's been a thread and a vein through my life that's been really important. And my husband Steve and I are in a band, and it's made up of people from Sunshine Canyon, and many of those folks have lost their homes in the fire as well. So music is an important thing that makes us all feel good and a place of home. This rocking chair was my grandmother's, and it's from Wisconsin, and it was saved by the men at the end of the road, County Road 83, out of my home when it was catching on fire. This is Steve, my husband's guitar. He's had for a very long time too, from Ohio. This mandolin was from my grandfather in Kentucky, and that was a gift many years ago. And this painting is my father's, oil painting from the late 40s.
Thank you very much, Dee.
You're welcome.
Is this a special piece of music for you?
Yes, I just improvised and made the song up, and it's kind of a serenade, lover's serenade, or kind of Mexican tune. It has a little bit of that to it. And I haven't written it down, but it just has sort of a different feel to it, almost like a waltz. And so it was fun to create a piece of music in the middle of being moved around and having the band and music and the flute as a vein, a river. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.